Now, times have changed since 6-year-olds walked home from school and kids wandered the streets with their friends until dark.
Are you allowed out on the streets by yourself?
Yes, but only if we're going to friends' houses or if we're going to play not on the road. But we have to tell our mummy where we're going before we go there.
Because it's quite dangerous with a lot of cars, isn't it?
Anyway, not many cars come up our little lane.
Safety first. Can you imagine kids now? Can you imagine now letting kids that age playing in the street alone? These days, parenting looks a little different, and 30% of Australian families rely on grandparents to help look after their children for at least part of the week. For more, we're joined by early childhood expert, Dr. Jane Williams. Jane, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Run us through it. What have you seen as the biggest changes to parenting in the last 30 years?
Oh, well, good morning, everybody. Parenting has changed dramatically in the last 30 years. A lot of the time it's because of safety concerns. There's been a big shift in how free we let our children roam, and I think that has sparked a lot of changes in the way we look after children. But it's more to it than that. I think we have smaller families. Most parents have families where both parents are working. And so children have a lot more care now from outsiders, be it childcare or grandparents or aunts or uncles or other family members.
We talked about something like this similar earlier in the week. You say important conversations need to be had before grandparents agree to take on caring duties. Let's start with the rules. Is it okay for grandparents to have rules in their home that are different from the parents' rules?
Oh, I think that's a really important lesson for children. I think absolutely grandparents can have different rules. Children, I think, can learn from a very young age that there's rules at one home and rules at another, and it's life is like that. Rules are different at school. When they go to school, rules will be different at kindy or daycare, or rules will be different when they go to someone else's house. So definitely rules can be different, but I think what parents and grandparents need to be very clear on is what those rules are and to talk about them. You just don't establish different rules and say, well, these are the rules of my house, without having a chat with the parents about it first so that they agree to that. I think the conversations that you have before you start looking after your grandchildren are really important conversations.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you know, the role of grandparents has changed in that time. It's not just ducking over to Nana's house and she gives you a piece of cake and a cheeky $5 note. They're actually in proper caregiving roles. So how do you then suggest grandparents handle the issue of discipline, especially if they don't mind giving their own kids the odd smack? Or maybe they want to let their grandchildren run wild. How do they handle discipline?
I think that is a really important discussion to have. Everybody raises children differently, there's no doubt about it, and there are no fixed rules, but there are things like smacking, which is no longer an acceptable sort of way of raising children, whereas we're trying to change society's ways of looking at a more less aggressive way of raising children, so that they have a really good, a stable and understanding of what's acceptable and what's not. And so grandparents, I think most grandparents today are very aware of that, and I think also it's another conversation that needs to be had with the parents, you know, and ask the parents, how would you like us to discipline the children? What rules do you put in place? What actions do you do? Because there are different ways without smacking. You know, some people might like the timeout method, other people like the calm down method. There are quite a few different ways, and I think grandparents really need to have a good conversation with parents about what they would like, how they would like discipline managed, because we do need to give our children structure and routines. They're a very important part of children working out how do they fit in this family, how do they fit in their grandparents' house, and how do they fit in society. So getting that right and getting that balance right is really important.
Yeah, and another delicate issue that always seems to come up, I mean, I kind of do it the same with godchildren as well. Is there anything wrong with grandparents spoiling grandchildren with gifts?
that's another conversation that needs to be had. I think when you're relying on your grandparents to help raise the children in particular, it's not something that they just do without your contribution as a parent. But gifts and things like that are again another conversation. You know, I would like to give, for example, I have grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren, and I like to give a group gift that I feel is developmentally appropriate, that is probably a little more expensive than the parents would like to pay. And so I talk to the parents about it. Is it okay if I give them a nice big gift for Christmas? I'm a movement. That's where I want children to be, moving a lot. So I like things like climbing frames and play gyms and trampolines, and these are quite expensive these days. And so that's the sort of conversation I have with my own children. Is it okay if I give the grandchildren an expensive gift? I think one of the really important things for grandparents to understand is that if they give their grandchildren a gift every time they come, then that's what the grandchildren are going to expect. And you don't want grandchildren just to come to you because they want the gift. You want the grandchildren to come to you because you enjoy being with them and that they enjoy being with you. So we have to be careful with gifts and not to overgive.
Yeah. Dr. Jane's book, written with Dr. Tessa Grigg, is called Grandparenting Grandchildren: New Knowledge and Know-How for Grandparenting the Under Fives. Jane, thank you so much for joining us today. So interesting, and certainly something that Tristan will be using when his parents arrive in a week.
Great, enjoy. There's a lot of grandparents who've missed out seeing their grandchildren during this COVID period. And I think that's a loss for not just the grandparents, but the grandchildren as well. So have a wonderful time.
Most definitely. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.